It is October. No, it's not. It is September 29th.
Almost October.
Not yet. 8:04 p.m. And this is Writing Talks. I'm your host, Alex Lander. And yes, you may have noticed a slight title change there. Writing Talks, not Writing Walks. And that's also because I have with me once again the wonderful Sarah Rhea Werner.
Hello,
Sarah.
Hello.
How are you?
Wonderful. I'm happy to be here.
The reason this happened again is, well, as much as I love just chatting with Sarah all the time anyway, and I think everyone else does too, and hearing from her. Last time Sarah recommended a book, which I ended up getting through the library on audio and then listening to and then loving. And after Sarah talked so highly about it last time, I thought it'd be fun to talk about that book this time again. And Sarah very graciously said, yes, let's go for it. So this Writing Talks thing might just become a thing now a few times over the year, you know, as we sit and chat. Especially my goal is, I think, not just to be doing like a book review or talking about books, not that there's anything wrong with that, but I think as us as writers looking at it and seeing what we can take from it and learn from it and kind of use in our own craft. So the book we're talking about here is The Fisherman by John Langan, which came out in 2016. When did you read it, Sarah? Do you remember?
A couple weeks ago. Yes.
Oh.
So
was this a reread or this was just around the time we did the show?
No, I'm in a period of discovery and I'm in the midst of discovering horror still. So like I've exhausted mystery and cozy mystery and I'm on to horror now. I'd never heard of John Langan before. And I think honestly, The Fisherman was recommended to me via Goodreads, just like because I clicked a link that went to a link, so it was completely happenstance. And so that
Goodreads rec thing actually worked for once.
It worked, yeah. I get a lot of really good recommendations through there, and I'm really appreciative of that. But yeah, so I picked up The Fisherman, like not knowing anything about the author or what it was going to be like, and it was just. I had an incredible time on this journey.
I'd seen it. It's come up definitely a lot when you do kind of like horror search lists and I'll see it. And I think the cover was kind of blah. And then the title and then the little bit of the, I didn't get enough into the summary. So it was like, oh, just hear the title. And then a little bit of the summary was like, oh, this is not going to grab me. And so I didn't, but then after you said, oh, it was amazing. And especially when you were talking about all the different layers and levels to it and how it goes down. Yeah, that really intrigued me. So then I was like, okay, I'll give it a try. And then it was a lot of fun. Yeah.
I love that you mentioned the cover because I had the same issue with it. It's and oh boy, do I not want to be the kind of person who judges a book by its cover, but you know, I think we do. We're visual creatures, a lot of us are, and that's how we form a first impression of something. And my first impression of this book was like, oh, it brought to mind. Have you read The Terror by Dan Simmons?
Yeah.
Also, the edition that I have, at least, it's got like a glacier on the cover, and you're like, okay. Like it's completely disconnected from the content and it's just like, so bizarre.
I mean, we'll do a little bit of a spoiler here for anyone who's not read it, but the book's been out for 10, 15 years or something. It's been out for a while, so you shouldn't get spoiled. But yeah, they could have easily gone with a cover of like the ships or just one of the ships or both ships stuck in the ice. And then like, you know, the specter of the monster on the ice or something that could have done a lot more. Yeah.
Yeah. Like if this is a monster book and both of these books that we're talking about are in some way, like we're not talking about both of them, but The Fisherman is also a monster book. Put a monster or like hint at a monster on the cover. It reminds me of, I used to read the Penguin literary editions for college and it was always, you know, a Jane Austen novel. And then it had some like painting, like a Renaissance painting or whatever on the cover. And it's just like, this is so boring, but maybe that's just me not appreciating the finer arts.
I don't know. I think you've got something there though too. I mean, what if maybe they were both trying for a kind of more artsy literary look to it?
I think so.
Maybe.
And both are good literary works. I mean, I loved The Fisherman. It's extremely literary, but it's also readable. And that's, I don't even know if we want to get into that right now. But yeah, I would love to see a different cover on this book, at least one that better sets expectations for what you're going to get inside.
Well, we'll put a pin on that. And maybe after we've gone and talked about the book for a while, then we'll come back to that later and talk about what our ideas for covers might be. All right, so we'll just start out with the little summary I pulled up off Goodreads. So The Fisherman by John Langan. In upstate New York, in the woods around Woodstock, Judgment's Creek flows out of the Ashkogan Reservoir. Steep banked, fast-moving, it offers the promise of fine fishing and of something more, a possibility too fantastic to be true. When Abe and Dan, two widowers who had found solace in each other's company and a shared passion for fishing, hear rumors of the creek and what might be found there, the remedy to both their losses, they dismiss it as just another fish story. Soon, though, the men find themselves drawn into a tale as deep and old as the reservoir. It's a tale of dark pacts, of long-buried secrets, and of a mysterious figure known as Der Fischer, the Fisherman. It will bring Abe and Dan face to face with all that they have lost and with the price they must pay to regain it. What do you think? No? You're making a face.
Oh, it's just as bad as the cover. It does such a disservice to the rich story. Like maybe that last sentence about like, oh, it'll bring them face to face with everything they've lost. Like, yeah, that's like accurate. But also, do you want to mention, okay, I should not be in charge of writing book blurbs because I would just write something that said like, oh my gosh, this book is freaking amazing. Go read it. And like, it would say that on all the books.
That's why you get author blurbs from when they'll say that, but again, with blurbs like this, it's hard. It is a balance of intriguing the reader enough to read it. But again, you don't want to give too much away, because like Der Fisherman is like this basically ancient magician who's been around for a very long time. And again, like with the ghost tree, we're going to spoil everything here. So if you want to read the book first, stop now.
Go do that. Yes, pause.
But so yes, Der Fischer, the Fisherman, is this like ancient magician who's been around hundreds of years at least, and then he's trying to harness Leviathan, which is like an ancient, I don't know, was it a magic but it was like an ancient creature too.
I saw it as like a Lovecraftian thing because they're actually like spoilers again, near the end of the book, they are actually going through portals. Like there are other planes of existence or other dimensions that they're traveling between, whatever. Yeah. And it just goes full out Lovecraftian, and you just don't expect that.
But I did like their reference. I thought their kind of context they gave you for it was it's the Leviathan out of the Bible. Yeah, that thing, what that was talking about. Well, this is what it's based on or whatever, It's like, even more primordial, ancient.
Yes. Yes. I love it. I love a good monster book. And this is definitely a good monster book.
Now, I wasn't always clear. So he's trying to catch this giant thing of whatever it is, and which presumably it's some sort of power or whatever, but it wasn't always clear what he was going to get out of it. Did you get it?
What a good question. I had the feeling, and it was a while ago when I last read this, and I'm drinking.
That's the problem when you read a lot too, that you're like, I've done 5 books in there. That's like an amazing story.
I hit my 52 books this year. Like I've read 52 books. That was one of 52 that I've read so far this year. But I have the feeling it was he was trying to undo some kind of deal, or he was trying to undo or unmake something, or re-bargain with something. So I think that there was a little bit of that in there.
Right, because there was the stuff with his own family too, where I'm sure it was his wife and daughter had been killed or whatever during the again, it was like 1800s, maybe even 1700s or something like that too. In I don't want to say Germany. I know it was Hungary, wasn't it? Was it Hungary? I can't remember.
The details escape me.
Some Eastern Europe place, because that was because of his accent and stuff like that. I remember just talking about that. But just the whole like winding of myth and history into the whole place too, and especially when they talk a lot about the reservoir too, that it drowned this town that used to be there hundreds of years ago. I like to think that's where John Langan first got the tidbit of an idea. Was what about those towns that get covered in water and all their history is erased?
I mean, it's our own Atlantis, right? It's our own lost and buried cities. And there's something so beautifully appealing about that.
It makes me think too of, it was AI. Remember that movie?
Yeah.
Spielberg. Well, was it half Spielberg, half, what was his name? Who passed away? Director. I can't remember now. There was another director who was on it.
It's going to drive me insane.
He did like the first half of it, and then Spielberg finished it. But I just remember at the end too, where the AI robot is like looking through and they're seeing all the drowned villages and cities and all this stuff too. And just like, it's kind of like unearthing, a pyramid or something like that. It's just like, so what's going on here? What's the history? What's the story?
Powerful imagery. Yeah.
Absolutely. I do like that it starts all with, and as you were talking about these layers, because the first layer is the fishing stuff, and just goes way into detail on fishing. And like I joked with you saying, for a half a second, I thought maybe I should try it fishing. And I'm like, nah, I don't like killing fish that way.
I feel bad.
But just like for a lot of people, it's obviously a very serious passion and sport that they engage in. And just, they can just, and it's definitely something to said about sitting in a boat and just, not caring about anything and just enjoying the peace and quiet.
Yeah, there's it's just so fascinating, the layers in this story. It starts off with an older man who's been widowed, and he's, as the book blurb tells us, he's friends with another widowed man. And both of them find solace in fishing, but it's really more than that. It's so much of a character study, and it's so much, you're just getting into these characters' heads. And as you progress through the story, you're diving deeper and deeper and deeper into history and memory. And it's like, I remember just being in the middle of this book and just exclaiming to my partner, Tim, like, this is some of my favorite nonlinear storytelling. Like, it's just so beautifully. It was like,
was it Matryoshka doll thing, basically nested in each other? Yeah.
It's because you have the frame story, which is the old man. And sorry, one moment. You have the main story, which is the old man. He's not even that old. I think he's in his 60s. It's not old. And he's hanging out with his widower friend, and he has memories. So there's like a secondary story.
Who's a coworker, right?
Yes.
Coworker. That's right. Yeah.
Who is recently befallen.
He loses his kids and his wife in a horrible accident where he wasn't wearing the seatbelt, and he's the one who survived.
It's really hard. That's another thing, is there's so many different types of horror in this story. But we can go into that at another point. There's just pretty much every kind of horror is in this book. Not to speak too broadly,
but it never feels rushed at all. Like, it lets each person tell the full story, and you get to learn of everything going on. And it's impressive how they go through the grief that each character goes through and dealing with it, and how the dark turns they take and stuff like that. And especially how, like, the bit about how the first year is only so tough, but it's actually the second year that's the most tough once you pass that first anniversary. It's just like, whoa. And then seeing them just,
it was a type of sorrow that I couldn't even comprehend. And that just made losing myself in the story just all the more. It was portrayed so it felt truthful. And so getting lost in that was both, terrifying and kind of a joy, in a really sad, beautiful sort of way.
Yeah. Getting caught up in it. Like being pulled along on a wave or down the river.
I did like,
there was plenty of like fishing metaphors and stuff, and vocabulary that was used throughout, which I liked. Yeah.
And some playfulness with like, what is a tall tale? And they have tall tales within taller tales within even taller tales. It's just so masterfully crafted. So
then kind of at the heart of the book, you have them going on this particular fishing trip, and they want to go to this specific creek, which your main character who's been fishing for years doesn't know about from this other friend. And the other friend kind of hints about where he got it from, but it doesn't sound legitimate where he got the idea for it from. And then they go before they go there, they hang out at this diner in the morning. It was really like, it's rainy morning, and it was like, they had this nice breakfast that sounded delicious. And then the guy there is like, oh, you're going there? Yeah. You don't want to do that. And then it's kind of in the middle of the book at this point, Bradley, you get the full story of this history and the story of Der Fisherman. And again, as you were talking in the last one about how Ghostry reminds you a lot of that, and it's definitely a lot of similarities here where you have this huge backstory. But I felt this time it was done better than with the Ghostry, because it was like we got full flashbacks. And again, it was going deeper in time of what these lives were like and going through these stories, instead of it just being like, here's the story and I'm just going to tell it to you.
It's so weird because it breaks all the rules in the right way. Because so what happens is our two main characters are sitting in this diner, like you said, enjoying a breakfast. This random stranger comes up to them and is like, let me tell you. Yeah. And he's like, here, I'm going to talk for seriously a third of the book. And it's like, we have no context who this guy is, and yet we are immersed. And it even changes voice. Like if you look at the difference between the main character's voice, it switches very slightly to this new voice. And it's telling this intergenerational story of loss and horror without missing a beat. It doesn't take you out of the story. And in fact, it draws you further in. And I love that. It's like Inception. It just keeps drawing you into like newer nuclei. Like it's so incredibly done.
Well, I think the key, because up to this point, you've kind of been given hints here and there of what might be going on in some way here. If like something's weird going on, and it's something that reaches back through time, and then now all of a sudden you're going to get it. So you're like, oh, cool, I'm here for this. Tell me.
Yeah, it's just beautifully done.
And so then they do go to the creek, and hey, weird stuff happens, just like the guy said it was, and they kind of like can pass into the other world, and then they meet their fisherman where he's there. But each of them also gets a kind of like token thing of what they want, what they secretly desire, which would be their lost loved ones. But they're not really their lost loved ones. They're like twisted demon facsimile things, probably created by their fisherman to kind of like,
I was even just thinking zombies, exactly. They just come back wrong, or what are they? They're like being play acted by these other creatures. Like, yes, I really thought, of course,
because also the main character, he sees his old wife, and then they actually have sex, and it made me think of it's a succubus.
Yeah,
which again is a whole mythological thing that reaches back as well, and just but they're creations of their fishermen to some extent, because I'm trying to remember, he needs their life force. Is that what it was? Something like that to keep going while he tries to capture his big fish.
Yeah.
And he's just there.
And it sounds comical now when we're talking about it. It doesn't sound like a beautiful literary experience. And yet it is.
It is. And there's just, as you said, there's so many levels, but you're not lost. You can follow you've got the trail of breadcrumbs leading you nicely there and all the way back too.
Yeah.
But I did think, because of the fisherman is it's a predictable title almost to some extent, but it's a little boring. I thought of a better title would have been like Grief or something like that, because I feel like every character in the book is grieving to some extent and trying to solve that. And it's like that really captures it more for me than the fisherman.
I'm trying to think of like, what would entice me more or less to pick up this book? Because, in addition to the cover, it's also about the title. I will pick up a book with an interesting title, just without even reading the blurb or anything. I don't know if I would pick up a book called Grief. That sounds like something that I would just personally in this year of 2021.
Oh yeah, true.
I would be like, I can't handle this.
Not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole.
I don't know what I would have called it.
I'm also reminded of What Dreams May Come.
Yeah.
Which is Richard Matheson. But I'm also thinking of the movie with Robin Williams, and just that's again grief through a lost one and stuff, which again has a absolutely fantastic title. I mean, if you see that, you're grabbing it.
And artfully explored. And I almost feel like a title like that would be more appropriate to something like this. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder if again, you could say The Fisherman is a more classic horror title, going, I mean, I think that's Stephen King's thing, is always go for, just a couple words, short thing, quick and easy, whatever.
The Shining. Yep.
Yeah.
The Stand. It.
We could go on all day.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, what's his longest one?
Needful Things.
Still on 2 words.
Still, Dolores Claiborne.
What was it? That was 4 Past Midnight, but that was the Green Mile. They were on to 3.
That's 3 words. I feel like something maybe in the Dark Tower, like Wolves of the Kala. Is that what it is? That's
or Song of Susanna. One?
Yeah. That's a good one.
All right. I feel like I should be able to think of one, but I can't. Actually, they're all just really short. Cujo. Christine. Just one word. Yeah. Anyway. Yes, horror titles. I'm thinking of Joe Hill. Like, does he do those as well? I feel like he does longer ones. Well,
I only know Horns. Like, that's the only Joe Hill I know.
Horns. Nope. I guess we're heart-shaped box. We're in the same thing.
Yeah.
So what about critiques about the book? What did you not kind of like about it?
You mentioned the sex scene. Mm-hmm. That bothered me.
It felt cliche, honestly. It's like, yes. Oh, obviously he's gonna have sex with her.
I was like, really, dude? Yeah. It's like, oh, and it's like, it's outside, it's freezing, you're all gritty and dirty, and like, I don't know, maybe that's their thing. But like, and it also bothers me a little bit. Felt
very like cliche man horror writer.
Yeah.
Gotta do this sex scene in here,
know? It felt very rote. I honestly, if I can be honest with you, I was like, oh no, I don't want this sex scene. And so I just skipped ahead until I saw it was over. Cool. And I was like, now I can get back into the story and care about it. And it's also really weird when you have, I know this is not necessarily a story of like possession, but it has this female figure who's impersonating his wife is not his wife. And like, that always brings up like kind of weird, icky, like,
and you had to have the moment at the end of after they're done, like, oh no, it's not her. All of a sudden it's this hideous creature. Oh, what have I done?
Yeah. And then it's like, oh, and then like, does consent factor into that? And like, I don't know, it just gets a little weird, a little gross, but again, that's a different flavor of horror. And for somebody like, that's their thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm thinking that juxtaposed with the other character then, who's just literally just sitting with his family, his twins and his wife. And it's kind of like our main character can see that they're not really who they are. And yet he's blinded by it. And to the point where he eventually attacks our main guy too, to try and get him to stay.
Yeah.
Which also felt, I could, again, that felt a little bit predictable at the end too, where it's like, oh, I got to get him now. And I'm going to go to any length I can to do it. And
yeah. It felt like, stretching a little bit. It was just a little too convenient. It's like, well, now I must make this ending very neat and tidy, and I must kill you until you die, except, oh, it's me who's dying.
Oh, and the Fisherman is not screwed over because the bad guy can't win.
Yep. So otherwise, I don't know. Critic wise, I think that was really the only thing that stuck out to me. I did like the ending.
Mm-hmm. I felt because the ending, because then he resolves that thing, and then I didn't know actually what time period we were in too, because we'd already gone back hundreds of years before, and then we found out it was like was it the 80s again, maybe earlier or something like that, and it felt like, okay, I get he needs to move forward in time to get to the coming again through the 2000s, but it was kind of weird to have all this like history lesson. Oh, the Gulf War or Bush and all this stuff. Like, what do I need this for? I don't need a history lesson on this.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, September 11th and all that and whatever. But then it does a great setup at the end where there's this huge flood and the water comes up to the house, and that's when whatever was still, trying to get him is there still, and to some extent, which was kind of neat.
Yeah, I liked that.
It felt like that went on too long to get to that point.
I agree. I would agree with that. It was one of those scenes that like it was annoying, and so I just kind of dismissed it. So thank you.
Like it would definitely be tied in some way to the story going on, but it wasn't. It was just like, here's a history lesson of the last 20 years, and then we're going to get to the present.
The editor should have just been like, yeah, no, okay, keep going.
cross. Let's take these out. Did the book remind you of any other books other than The Ghost Tree that we mentioned?
Well, probably just because of the title, it reminded me of the movie Big Fish, which also deals with loss and grief. And I know it's a lot different tonally because it's like very whimsical, but it's still it questions, what is a tall tale, and it has monsters in it. And so maybe that's just me being really shallow. Be like, yes, fish equals fish. Yes,
right.
That's me being smart. It also reminded me of The Terror by Dan Simmons, but I think that was just because of the cover. So these are all like aesthetic remembrances. I've really never read a story this complexly layered, and maybe that's just the fault of like me for not reading deeply enough or widely enough and reading too many cozy mysteries. But like it felt very, very unique to me. How about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just again with all the layers, it was definitely. I was about to say lead on to the next question. What did you take as a writer from it? And it's definitely being able to have all these layers and not being confused by it or lost, even though there was never really a date mentioned necessarily, but because of how it was done and the clarity of how it was done, you kind of knew who you were with and when you were and how it was all working together. And I think the key going that it went, even though it was all kind of nested together, it was still a kind of chronological, and then it went back in time and then brought you back to the present sort of thing, almost like diving down into the depths and coming back up or something. Yeah.
it guided you very well. It was very, without being obvious, without being too, it didn't like strong arm you narratively. It was gentle guidance. And I want to read it again so I can pick apart how he did it. Now that I'm aware of it, I want to dissect it and figure out the how.
I was thinking it should have had more references to Moby Dick being the other big fish story. But I was just thinking, probably did. But maybe not. Well, I feel like the first line had something like, "Don't call me," or "Call me something else."
Don't call me Abe or whatever. Yeah.
It was something like that. Yeah. I think that's what it was actually. Yeah. Or "Don't call me Abraham. I'm known as Abe." Yeah. So there was a nod, but I guess that's also a different story because that's one of, chasing and capturing what you want to get and stuff. Whereas this was a different story in that respect. Yeah.
Very different themes there. Yeah.
So now that we've digested it all, taken it all apart, what would be a better cover?
I want something with a monster on it. Like I want something that hints at the actual depth.
Because I was trying to remember the bit where like Dear Fisherman, he's fishing the thing, and there was all that stuff about the chains and stuff locking. Like it could be some like creepy looking fisherman guy who doesn't look really human, but is like casting a giant rod into something and whatever, and just that would be kind of cool. Yeah,
I'm thinking is it Lauren Goff or Lauren Groff? I never remember her name. But she has, for her covers, it's always some kind of like animal skin. And then so maybe just like black fish skin with like a chain across it or something would be, I don't know, more compelling. But you know what? John Langan, maybe he doesn't need me making up sensational John Langan
didn't have
covers.
Any choice in it. It was probably like the publisher said, "This is what we're going to do," and because it usually is the case from what
Picture of water.
Even Stephen King doesn't always get to pick his covers. It's just publishers do it because that's what works. That's what we do. It works. Yeah, whatever.
Well, we at least read it.
We at least read it, even if we didn't appreciate the title and the cover.
Yeah.
That'd be kind of a neat thing to be like all these redesigned covers of books to make it better or something,
Love it. Yes.
So this is where we should go on to our next segment of something about writing. And I prompted you to come up with something this time. Do you have anything you want to talk about with writing? Oh,
yes. Yes. Motivation. I know I need to move forward in this story and I don't want to. I'm feeling unmotivated. Well, and it's, I feel like this is something we could talk about all day. So maybe what I want to focus on is resistance versus motivation. And how do you move from one into the other? How do you move from resistance into motivation? Is it an act of willpower? Is it always something that is consciously chosen? I'm very curious because I don't know how often you get stuck. I get stuck a lot.
Not often, unfortunately.
Okay.
But I'm trying to think of what
keeps you going?
You're kind of straddling this line then of, am I having some sort of writer's block, or is it more just the story hasn't figured itself out or whatever? I do find always going on walks, running, anything that gets the heart rate up. I mean, they've shown this for creativity, getting the heart rate up just literally puts more blood in your brain and gets all the juices flowing in a good way. Definitely stimulates my mind.
So my question is if you don't want to write, you want to write and you don't want to, how do you make yourself go for a run or a walk knowing that you don't actually want to write?
I
And maybe it's just me who struggles with this, but like wanting to want to create is like, it's, and I don't know if it's necessarily like, especially like present in 2020, 2021 and what we're going through, if we're just maybe all mentally exhausted or if we've lost sort of some willpower there.
This thing that should have been over that's still going on for another year at least. And how we're supposed to deal with it. I do find when I do get little like whatever, possibly stuck or whatever in some way, I'll attack the seed. I'll do something different in a different way. Whereas I'll maybe try it from a different character viewpoint, or like I think I mentioned before, where I had this episode where I knew where it was going to go, but then there's this one part where it could have gone in a totally different direction. And just, I did that as like a little fictional journaling project of like, this is never going to happen, because I'm able to just put it in my little journal here. I can do whatever I want with it and go on this whole little separate adventure that's not going to happen. But it was freeing in a way to be like, okay, all right, we went that way and that's what happened over there. But now I can go back to this knowing kind of that that's what happened that way, but this is what's going to happen this way. And it was kind of a freeing, way by doing that. I mean, the thing I've tried a few times before and heard is, again, changing it from character point of view, even changing perspectives, whether it's, close first person or third person or omniscient, things like that. Just changing up the story completely to kind of give you a different viewpoint to it that can kind of help you see something you hadn't seen before and start you on a path you might not have seen.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's the thing is, it's like, it's really, I don't know, it feels like it's really obvious. Like, oh yeah, of course, there's all these fun things you can do to spice it up, but like, you have to enact those, you have to want to spice things up. And I wonder if this is just maybe a symptom of burnout that I'm talking about, like dreading working on this thing that you're supposed to love. Like maybe that's indicative of something else. Maybe it's not an issue with the story. Maybe it's an issue with what's going on in your life, or an issue with exhaustion, burnout. Yeah. That kind of stuff.
I remember that. Now that I think about it, that was definitely one time I did get stuck last year, which was, I think it was late March, 2020, where it was like, okay, I'm going to do some writing now. And it'd be like, even though usually I can force something, and I was forcing, it was just like, I just don't want to do this. And like, what the heck is going on? And then it took me like 3 weeks to be like, oh, you're stressed because of the pandemic and you can't write. You haven't done this before and felt it before. So it was a new thing for me, and realizing, okay, I just need to and that was just a case of, okay, step away, don't do that, read and do other stuff and just not worry about that for now. That's the thing I've given myself is, I think you mentioned in a recent episode, is grace, giving yourself space, giving yourself time. Definitely not these where I like to try and work every night if I can. But over the last year, it's just been like, okay, I'm not feeling it tonight, and I'm not going to feel guilt about it. I'm just going to take the night off, take a break or whatever, and do that.
So and it's actually giving yourself grace instead of just saying, hey, you should give yourself grace. So like actually doing it. Yeah. What a novel idea.
Just like, as I mentioned, I'm about to go on vacation for 2 weeks, but I love the idea of getting a ton of work done, but I'm not going to set myself up to be like, okay, I need to get all this done. I'm just going to be like, okay, I'd like to get some stuff done, but we'll see how it goes. And if I end up having to, help my kid the whole time, I'm okay with that too.
Yeah. I feel like that's just a really healthy mindset to be in. Just,
Don't stress yourself out. You've got enough going on with everything, that giving yourself the break you need. Yeah.
Yeah.
Give yourself some time
and space and grace and maybe take a nap.
Definitely. I think, reading other books and finding other stories and having fun with that. And just, I definitely find like Stephen King is one of those. Joe Hill is one now. There are a few authors that it's just like, when I read them, it just makes me want to write. I don't know what it is. It's just like, maybe because I've read them since I was a kid or whatever it is, but it's just like, okay, now I want to find some paper and a pen and just write something, because it's just, it gets me going. Not that I like the particular story I'm reading, I want to write or anything like that. It's just like, oh, I forgot how fun creating stories is.
Yeah. Like whatever energy they have that they put into the story, it's like contagious. Yeah. I have that too.
Comes off the page and you absorb it. Metaphysical.
It is, and it's magical. I love it.
I like being in the zone or feeling it, whatever. Again, maybe it is some sort of something in the ether.
Who knows what we're drawing upon?
All right. Well, that is a good segue then to recommendations. Do you have a recommended book?
I do. Right now, and maybe this will spark our next conversation, I don't know. Right now I'm reading My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones.
Oh, wow. He's
so
another
good.
author I've heard a lot before, but I haven't got around to reading that much.
Put this on your list. It's so good.
Talk about a title.
Yeah, well, it's very different. You go from The Fisherman to My Heart is a Chainsaw, and it's like, wow, can it be more different? I don't think so.
Could you say My Heart is a Chainsaw? Isn't that just another way of saying grief?
And there's our tie-in. Every book is called Grief. I think that says more about you than it does about the books.
So what's can you give a little bit about what it's about?
Yeah. So, like I said, I'm diving into the horror genre, like wholeheartedly. And there's a concept in horror of this thing called the final girl. So if you're watching a horror movie, there's going to be one survivor at the end. That's the final girl. And she's the one who gets away. She's like psychologically scarred, but she like somehow through purity or some kind of endurance or whatever, heavy-handed thing the movie is selling, she makes it through to the end.
She's blonde.
Yeah, usually. Well, and that's an excellent point too, is that she's usually blonde, she's athletic, or she's like thin. She looks traditionally beautiful. This story, My Heart is a Chainsaw, is about a teenage indigenous girl who's living in a very small town. And she's obsessed with horror movies and essentially, or specifically slasher movies. And so she interprets the world around her through all of these slasher movies. So if you're a fan of horror and specifically, especially slasher movies, read this book because there are so many. I'm not catching all of the
references.
Yeah. Oh, it's so rich. But she is a series of murders is happening. And she's like, where's the final girl? Where's the final girl? And these new rich people are moving in and sort of, essentially colonizing this small town with big McMansions and stuff. And so it's just such an interesting look at, is our main character going to be the final girl? Can she be the final girl? What does it mean to be a final girl? What do all these horror stories have in common? And it's just this character, the main character, her name is Jade. She's beautifully written. Oh my gosh. Like seldom have I identified so hard with like a main character, just like you really get to know her heart. Like Stephen Graham Jones, like spares no expense in character development for this amazing main character. So I don't know the ending yet because I think I'm only like 60% through it at this time, but so far it's a definite recommend.
Because you're e-reading it, huh?
I am. And I can see, I don't know what page I read on my phone, like at night. And it's like, I'm on page like 12,000 out of like 978 million. It's like that, numbers sort of lose meaning. Yeah. So I'm 60% done.
I'll definitely add that to the list. I was going to say, when you were talking about going through a horror phase, do you find you definitely go through reading phases of genres that you go through?
Yeah. And especially like authors, like I remember I jumped into the Elizabeth Peters, Amelia Peabody series, and I just like mowed through that. And then I think I went from there to like Nancy Pickard, and I was just reading all of these like female-led mysteries. Exactly. Just devouring them. And so, I kind of get into it's not a rut because it's great. It's the opposite of a rut. Yeah, I get onto a super highway.
I think it's like your writing season. It's like a genre season or something. Yeah,
it is. Yeah, I don't know why I do that.
Then I do like sci-fi, and then I'll like fantasy, and then back to horror again. Or whatever
Yeah.
You rarely do I just stick with plain fiction though. I always want speculative.
I love genres. I love genres. And again, maybe that's a little, I don't know.
I was going to briefly mention the Book of Accidents by Chuck Wendig. I'm halfway through it, and it's fantastic. And again, a lot of like different kinds of horror like this of going on and different levels and all this stuff. So you will love that. And then another one I'm mostly through now is Stephen King's latest, Billy Summers, which sounded at first like, because I usually don't read summaries of Stephen King because it's just like, it's a Stephen King book, I'm reading it no matter what. which has been true except for Lissy's story, which I can never get through. That one.
Really?
One of his books I didn't get through yet.
It's about a writer.
I know.
Oh.
Well, he's done that a few times. So is this one, actually.
Kind of a thing. Misery, yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of them. But this one, it sounded like a regular, like kind of mafia story where there's a hitman and he's gonna assassinate some guy, whatever. But then it kind of goes like that. Then he assassinates the guy and you think that's the finish, but it's like, that's like barely a third of the book. And then there's so much more to come after that. And what I really enjoyed about it, and I've enjoyed it, is seeing how, because I know he's a discovery writer, how he was like going along and just writing the character and seeing how these points led. And then this weird thing happened. And like, oh yeah, I can suddenly see that happening because it just occurred to you and you put it in there with the character. And it was just, it's fun to read it like that and to be like, oh, I know where you're going with all this, but you also don't really know because you can't predict what's going to happen.
I do love that. When you feel like a kinship with the writer or with the author, and you're just discovering the story and you feel like you're doing it alongside them. Like that's really a cool feeling.
It's special. Yep. Alrighty. Well, thank you so much again for joining me, Sarah. And
thank you, Alex.
I'll have to see you again on the next writing talks.
That would be very exciting. And I look forward to it. Thank you again. It's always a joy to talk to you.